Well, thank you for the opportunity to appear here this afternoon. I won't repeat the information that was in the written comments that I sent to you in the interest of time. I know your time is short today. I just want to thank the Transient Guest Tax Committee, the council as a whole, for their support over the years. The work that we did 11, 12 years ago now to restore the Great Overland Station leveraged a federal grant, and the money that we have received from the transient guest tax over the years has been used to pay off the bank loan that we took out in order to do the work back in 2002, 2003, early 2004. And so consequently, receipt of these funds has been very important to us over the years, as it's allowed to meet our obligations to repay that loan. So with that in mind, if you have any questions, I'll try to answer them. Otherwise, I'll let you get on with your duties.
Thank you, Mr. St. John. Any questions, Mr. St. John, from the committee? Thank you very much. Mr. Anderson, did you have anything you wanted to add?
No, I sure don't. Thank you very much.
Thanks for being here. We have quite a bit of work to do. Does anybody else have any quick comments they want to offer? I know, Kurt, you submitted some. Thank you.
I'll let that speak for itself.
Thank you very much. Appreciate that. Our time is somewhat limited. Okay. Pam, I just want to clarify just a couple of things. The amount of transient guest tax going to the Railroad Heritage and Riverfront Park, those are set by resolution, are they not?
Correct.
Okay. And what about the amount to historic preservation?
That's also set by a resolution. It was the balance of the 1% that goes to the Great Overland Station.
Okay. All right. Okay. The task before the committee is to adopt 2014 budget. It looks like we've got to come up with some cuts of about $500,000. Anybody have any thoughts on how we might want to get there? Sally?
I think before we start to look at expenses, it would be good for us to agree on what we think the revenue will be. And I say that because if we had a handout last time of 10-year history, and close to 10 years anyway, and we also had a report on the first quarter of 2013, which was substantially under the first quarter of 2012. I got a little concerned that we might have been a little ambitious with the $2.1 million for 2013, and therefore a little ambitious to repeat that for 2014. In particular, hopefully we'll meet or exceed the $2.1 million. I'm watching Kurt here. But if we didn't, we would exhaust the reserve that's in that budget. And then we wouldn't have any reserve to start with in 2014. We can't change the 2013 budget at this point, but I began to wonder whether 1.95 million might not be a better, or more conservative anyway, revenue goal than 2.1 million. And therefore, of course, that would change the if we thought that the overall receipts would be lower, it would change the soccer number as well.
Pam, the last information we have is as of April 30th. Do you have any updated figures on TGT revenues?
No, we haven't come in yet for the second quarter of the year.
Okay. Any estimates or thoughts on your part as to how accurate the 2.1 is in terms of attainment?
Well, I did talk to the hotelers, Bill from Paris, and he felt that the 2.1 was realistic this year, whatever that's worth. However, you also want to say something, because I read your memo as well. Yeah, about the 53%.
Mr. Young?
Well, the only thing I would say at this point, and Jeff and I were kind of whispering together here just to get some degree of confirmation. I think the 2.1 is still a realistic number at this stage of the game, Karen. I really do. So the last 2 months' worth of receipts have been up, comparatively speaking, to the previous year for those same 2 months. So if it were me at this point, I'd continue forward with the 2.1 estimate on the
Okay.
revenue side at this point.
Sure. Elaine?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I want to ask you a question about what you just talked about with the estimates that would come in. Knowing that this comes from Heads on Beds, and we need to reduce $500,000 in cuts to meet the budget, where would the hoteliers feel that needs to be done? In what's been proposed?
In
for
what's
last
been
quarter?
proposed, I think if you look at it very carefully and evaluate each of the requests on the standpoint of what's going to put a head on the bed, you've got some requests in there that frankly are not going to put heads on the beds. And Bill did a very good job of explaining at the last meeting, the $150,000 for wayfinding signs takes 37,500 room nights in this city to replace. So my recommendation, as I said in the memo I drafted earlier today, would to be evaluate those requests based on what's putting heads on the beds, and you'll get to your shortfall pretty quickly.
Okay, thank you.
Well, I'm comfortable using the projected revenue for 2014, including the ending balance of $2,615,428. Pam, at this point, does it look like we're still going to end up with an ending balance for 2013 of $165,428?
At this point in time.
All right.
The third and fourth quarter are always our bigger revenue receiving quarters.
Okay. All right.
So unless it drops from past history, we
Okay.
should still be able to make it.
Okay. Committee have any thoughts on possible cuts?
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Go ahead.
I do feel that we need to consider the wayfinding signs as something that should not be coming out of this fund because it's not putting heads on beds, or there's no way to connect it with heads on beds. If we need to put that back in the general fund and find it another resource.
Okay.
But that, even, at least the 130,000 or 150,000 for the 82 more signs that we need to put up.
Okay.
So that's one of my recommendations.
Okay. Karen, do you have any possible cuts?
Well, I've got some overall thoughts, and then, yes, I do. First, and I don't know who's taking the minutes, but I do want the record to show that I'm concerned about the number. I'm willing to go with it if the others of the committee want to leave that, but I'm concerned that looking at history in first quarter compared to 2012, not compared to our goal, that I'd rather beat the number and not have to cut anybody later in the year than have the number too high. Overall, I want to just make a statement to my colleagues and to the audience too, of course, in terms of the use of the fund. I think that looking at heads on beds alone is too narrow a look at what this fund is for. I think we need to be getting increased conventions and sporting events. I think we need increased tourism. To do that, Visit Topeka is going to be doing some things on their own, but others will do things on their own. I think we measure that by looking at increased events, increased heads on beds, and increased tourism, and that we can measure that not only by increased transient guest tax, but looking at outcomes that show increases in sales tax as well. I just feel strongly that just getting people into a hotel overnight is too narrow a measure for what we want to accomplish with this money. If what we want, it's an outcomes base rather than a measure. That's one measure. But the outcome we're looking for is to have people visiting and touring in Topeka. And the way they can do that is through a convention or a sporting event or some organized formal event, but also through informal family and visiting experiences. And I just want to lay that out. With that in mind, I think you go through this list in a very similar way. But I just want to lay that out. Because in particular, I support having Visit Topeka come back in at their requested level at the, whatever that is, 3% and 0.5% for Visit Topeka as well as the bid fund. But I do think we should expect some outcomes, that we should do a proviso when the time comes and look at measurable outcomes that this group or the council sets when the time comes. So I'm comfortable with leaving that in.
Leaving what in?
Leaving Visit Topeka and the bid fund in with that proviso. I redid my numbers based on reducing the total, so there'll be some extra when I get done. I think in terms of deciding what to fund then, prior councils and committees before us decided they would not do events, but would instead leave it up to Visit Topeka and the use of the bid fund to do events. So I did not support events on the list. And then in terms of what entities we would fund other than Visit Topeka, I looked at that money being an investment in an entity that needed to grow to a key level, and or one that we had decided to support because it needed subsidy to survive and continue providing tourism and heads on beds. And with that, my choice is just a suggestion for you all in terms of what to fund besides Visit Topeka and the bid fund would be to, and looking at lower numbers, would be to fund Heartland Park at $300,000, which is comparable to the past. To fund the Sunflower State Games at whatever the equivalent amount is for what we expect to get, either $350,000 is what it shows. To fund TPAC at $100,000, expecting that might be a one-time deal with the new manager and the plans that they have to build business. Then, of course, to fund the Railroad Heritage and Riverfront Park and Historic Preservation combination. And possibly that's it. The zoo has really grown with the infusion of funding that they got last year. I'm open to that one. It seems they would need it again.
So what are your cuts?
The cuts would mean that we would not fund the Expo Center, as they have, they're growing and thriving, and that we would not fund the Neighborhood Academic and Athletic Association, as that is an event. And then there are some cuts from what people asked for in the list that I just read. I can go back through that if you want.
Let's see, you're reducing Heartland Park by $200,000.
Correct. And that's it, I guess. The others are,
So that
Match.
only comes up to $325,000. What am I missing?
well, are you missing the Railroad Heritage and River? No.
No?
Where did you, 325,000 in cuts?
Mm-hmm.
And the zoo would make it
No.
475,000.
I come up with 525,000. Is that what you said?
I didn't add it that way, so I would have to.
Pam, is it, what do you?
Just a second. What I'm understanding is she has 90,000 for Expo Center, 200,000 for Heartland Park, then 35,000 for the neighborhood academic. And then cutting 150,000 for the wayfinding signs, or,
Yes, I did not mention those.
and
You're
then
right.
cutting 200,000 for the zoo.
Correct.
I come up with 675, is that?
Right. That's what I come up with.
So what,
And in terms of the wayfinding signs, which I did not address, I do support funding them out of this source, but if the funding was tight, I don't have a problem with waiting and not doing it this year. I am concerned about that balance, something that came up last time, the ending balance, especially if we can't figure out a financing strategy to handle when the cash flow is low and the balance in the fund that day is low. Has there been any research since then so that we don't have to cut somebody just because the balance a certain day is low?
Well, we have to keep the cash balance as of December 31 positive. Our disadvantage is the fourth quarter comes. Now, we're going to accrue it, but I can't accrue cash. So it'll be a little neater this next year than it's been this year. But it's still something I have to watch. But we have traditionally not given the agencies their fourth payment until after the first of the year when we physically get the cash.
Just checking.
thank you, Mr.
Schwartz.
Chair. So what would be the ending balance with the 675,000 out?
Well, 500, so you're upping it another 175. So 150,
225.
325?
325.
And that's higher than it's ever been as a balance?
At the end of the year, yes.
No.
Wasn't the highest?
Well, the sheet that you
For the
gave
10
us,
years? Okay.
not
When
at
was it?
all.
At year end?
468,000 in '07 and 527,000 in
I
'08.
stand corrected.
I'm just worried that if the ending balance does drop this year, if we don't meet or exceed the 2.1 million, then we could have a lower starting balance next year.
That's correct. We could.
Schwartz.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Is someone from the Expo Center here that could answer a question on what that $200,000 cut would do?
990
It's just 90.
It's 90,000?
for the Expo Center.
All of it. HR Cook, General Manager, Kansas Expo Center.
What would that do? I mean, where would you
I'm sorry,
take that out?
I don't know.
That 90,000?
Well, we were budgeted this year for $50,000, so we requested 90. We wouldn't be taking it out of anywhere. Our focus would probably change. Councilman Hiller's assertion that we are doing very well in the convention business and the overnight stays, the sporting events is true. But most of that becomes because of the seed money that's placed in there at that amount that we can continue on to do that. So in my projections, if that were to come out, you would probably see that transient guest tax go down because we would concentrate in other areas of non-heads on beds. There's two things that we do. We do heads and beds, butts and seats. Butts and seats, ticketed events, those are the people that live in northeast Kansas, come to the events, they come to the gun shows, the boat shows, trade shows. They do not put heads in beds. With this money, we're able to kind of leverage our rental, our equipment, our services. For instance, next year, in this July, we're going after the World Horseshoe Tournament. Part of these funds, we're going to help subsidize the manpower, the labor, the dirt, and all the expenses for that. So,
Sure.
I worked with the Capitol Plaza quite a bit on, getting attractions to the hotel. So they would still be working on getting events so that heads on beds.
Yes,
So we would still have one entity trying to get
but they would
people
be
into the Expo Center.
it would be probably a little bit detriment to the Capitol Plaza because we'd have to focus on something else because they'd have to utilize our space also, and we would have to fill the space the best way we know how. I mean, it's not, by no means a threat. I'm just saying from a business standpoint, That's how we've used our money before. We don't use it for operating, we don't use it for salaries or anything like
So
that.
it's no cuts, it's a request that you had additionally, the 90,000?
The 90,000 is what we requested. This year, we have been awarded $50,000. And, I mean, if you were to allocate anything to the Expo Center, I'll take 50. 50 seems to be working for us to be able to do that.
Thank you.
I've got a package of cuts. If I can indulge the committee. And this comes up to a cut of around right at $500,000, Pam, so if you can keep a running total. We would cut the Expo Center from 90,000 to 50,000, which would free up $40,000. Cut Harlan Park from $500,000 to $340,000, which frees up $160,000. Cut T-PAC from 100,000 to 20,000, which frees up $80,000. We eliminate the Neighborhood Academic and Athletic Association completely, which frees up $35,000. We cut the wayfinding signs from 150,000 to 50,000, which frees up $100,000. We cut the transfer from the general fund from 200,000 to 137,500, which frees up $62,500. And then reduce the fund balance from 150,000 to 127,500, which frees up $22,500. And that comes up to 500,000. You want to check my arithmetic, Pam?
T-PAC was a savings of 80,000, or a
Correct.
cut of 80,000. $500,000, exactly.
Okay. So that's one way to get there.
So, Mr. Chair, you're leaving in the zoo then?
No, I'm reducing the, it's just the transfer to the general fund,
Okay,
reducing it from 200,000 to 137,500.
okay.
Okay. Sarah?
Question for HR, if I could. You described what you would use the money for in terms of the worldwide horseshoe tournament.
Horseshoe pitching.
Horseshoe
Not all of it, that's just
One thing.
one example.
And the question is, and I was new to this, I sat on this committee last year and tried to follow and understand the shifts that prior committees have made. Why would that need to be funded directly, that purpose of helping out with that particular tournament why would we need to fund that directly through you rather than have you do that through the bid fund?
The bid fund, the way we've worked with Visit Topeka regarding the bid fund originally was used for instance, the World Horseshoe Tournament, they have bid fees. The bid fee for this, correct me if I'm wrong, is either $25,000 or $25,000. $21,000. That's a $21,000 check here to the World Horseshoe Tournament. From there, and what we want to try to do is keep it a pure bid fund. Then I work with the Horseshoe Tournament in trying to reduce some of their expenses that they wouldn't be able to handle, whether it be a reduction in, of course, a little bit of reduction in rent. We're going to have to provide dirt. We have to build 200 horseshoe pits. The internet system, I mean, all the scorekeeping, trailers, everything that comes in, it's a very complicated event that goes on for an entire year. NAIA Wrestling is another event that, though will not generate any income for us, but again, it will generate the heads and beds when it comes in next year for wrestling, and that's where we utilize some of our services. Transient guest tax on our side was used to upgrade temporarily some of our video production equipment. bring in some other wrestling mats and other equipment that they're going to need so that we can produce this event. Because a lot of times, like the World Horseshoe Pitching Tournament is actually run by the local group, but the local group only has 50 members, they don't do this for a living, and it's oversaw by the World Horseshoe Committee, and they just kind of wave their magic wand and everything happens. And we try to work with them to make everything work behind the scenes, and the same with the NAIA state volleyball championships, or at the state volleyball high school, and state basketball are the same way. We're actually the managers of the event. I try to keep the bid fee rather pure, where if we're going after and they require, whether it be softball, baseball, they require these checks to be written in order to acquire these events. I'm more of the hands-on expense side. I hope I answered your question.
You did, thank you.
Okay.
I don't sense any interest on behalf of the committee to reduce Visit Topeka or the Visit Topeka bid fund. Is that inaccurate?
I would like to see the proviso, but not, so that we had some performance for next year, but the numbers are fine.
Okay, all right. Should we just go through these one at a time? Because we're going to start making some decisions here about what we're going to do.
Are you ready for a motion?
Sure.
To accept either suggestion? Because I would move that
Sure.
we accept the chair's suggestion on the cuts.
The ones I made.
Mm-hmm.
I'll second that. Any further discussion?
I don't think it leaves us enough of a balance.
You think the 127.5 is not enough?
I do. I mean, I really appreciate the competence of the hoteliers, but when I look at the history and the first quarter, I'm nervous about 2013, and therefore, I just think it's too tight. If 2013 is tight, we won't have a balance to start the year with. We could end up in the hole. I just,
So what any balance number are you comfortable with?
I would think, well, so that there's a balance at the end of that year too, either 250,000. And I would defer to Pam with what I've said in terms of some feedback on what you would think safe. She's looking for a high sign.
Can I talk?
Oh, sure. I wondered what you were doing today. What kind of sign language you were.
Mayor Button taught me well.
He taught us all well.
So,
Thank you.
This tax does fluctuate greatly depending on what's happening in the economy. And if the economy does go down, we saw year 2007, 2008. If you looked at the averages, the tax that came in falls really fast. There's not much advance warning. It's not a gradual fall, it just falls. And it makes it more difficult because we only get it on a quarterly basis. And so predicting ahead of time is risky or more difficult for us to do. And we just use past history and we look at the trend that's been coming through. I also talked to the hotelers to get their feeling on how business is going that year and stuff like that. So I kind of keep up with them as well to see what their input are, because they know more what's going on in the marketplace than I do. But it is risky, and that's why the recommendation was for 150 fund balance to kind of, because if it went down to the 1950, the 150 fund balance would cover that. We also traditionally look at about the third quarter, and if it doesn't look like it's coming in, then we do communicate with the agencies that you've given grants, because in the contract there's an out for the city based on revenue coming in. So even though you may give them a grant of $300,000, they're also aware when they sign the contract that if the city feels there won't be enough money, then we can reduce the grant amount to them based on that percentage. And usually we do it across the board percentage on what we think the cash is going to be. Now sometimes just in the past year, remember you went back and gave 50,000 to visit Topeka and to Heartland Park. That was one of the things we had cut a previous because we didn't feel the revenue was going to come in. As it did, we ended up having the additional cash, but we had originally cut them in the third quarter, so. But yes, we start looking at it very hard in the third quarter to see how things are going.
And if I could follow up on that, then,
Please.
that's why, having managed money, and these folks are very entrepreneurial, I'm sure if there's a time for supplemental, they'll put it to good use. But it is devastating, more devastating when you've planned on a budget for the year to get a cut way late in that game suddenly than to get it's better to get a supplemental in my view. So I would rather budget it short. And if something happened this year, again, with what we're looking at, if somehow we didn't make the 2.1 this year, we wouldn't start the year with a $165,000 balance. We'd start
Correct.
the year with a $15,000 balance. And so then we wouldn't have anything at the end of, even at a full 2.1, we wouldn't have anything at the end. And that's what I'm worried about.
Mr. Chair, could I offer just two little insights?
Sure, go ahead, Mr. Young.
Just for your information, the last 2 months of revenue collected have been 217.
217,000, and then the last recorded month, according
Jeff,
to
if you're going to speak, you need to be on the microphone.
Jeff Alderman, Visit Topeka, I work with Kurt. The last 2 recorded months, we track KDOR and the transient guest tax collection. The last 2 recorded months have been 217,000 and 247,000. I didn't have the paperwork brought with me, but 247 for the last month would be well over $100,000 versus what it was in 2012. Now that involves some of our events that we've been bringing into town, but I will say the trend is a positive trend, particularly when you look at the USSSA and the baseball tournaments and the things that we have for the summer. So I only offer that. That's nearly $500,000 in the last 2 months. And that's recordable and that's online, and I could provide that should the committee need that. But I do recall reviewing that with our finance.
That's why we had started out with the premise that the 2.1 is a realistic number. And the only other caveat that I would throw in is I think I like the direction you're going with your recommendation, but I would carry it one step farther cut a little deeper on the general fund portion of it. I really think we need to take a serious look at Heartland Park's request, and maybe, I know you've heard from Ray, but maybe give him the same opportunity to address like we did with HR, so.
Mr. Irwin, did you want to make some comments?
Mostly that have ever been to the NHRA event know that Heartland Park's largest event, which composes about a third of our business, that is a destination event. It's not like you can go to a national NHRA drag strip in Omaha or Oklahoma City. There's only 23 or 24 events a year, which those are held on about 16 or 17 different tracks. It is a very unique and a prestigious event to hold. By the same token, from our standpoint, from the Heartland Park standpoint, it's a highly expensive event because there's been a downturn in the economy. I'm sure you've all seen some of that in the last few years since '08. They have placed a bogey upon Heartland Park as being one of the smaller tracks, smaller attendance tracks. And we have to hit $1.5 million in revenue between tickets, title sponsorship, parking, RV, and so forth and so on. This year, through no fault of our operations, certainly, because I don't control the weather and I don't control when graduations are. For the pleasure of holding that event, instead of making money, I had the opportunity to pay them almost $200,000 for the pleasure of holding that event. Now, that doesn't make good business sense. As Karen indicated, we're entrepreneurs, but we're not fools. Okay, so I came to the request that I have because of the money that I do spend to promote that event. Heartland Park can survive fairly well, okay, without holding the NHRA event. The hotel, the lodging association, okay, the restaurant groups will not do so well if I bring on events only like Tough Mudder that's here for one day. 10 to 12,000 people are going to show up for that event, that's fine, but they're going to stay one night. Okay, it is one of the newer destination type events we have. But if I just do the bracket racing and things like that, or et cetera, okay, we're not going to have the room nights that are going to occur. And I know that Kurt and all the rest of the lodging association will verify that we are huge toward creating their income, which then, of course, translates directly into transient gas tax. And so we are working diligently to bring up our events. If I hadn't had that negative hit from the NHRA event this year, we'd have been pretty much, if you'll pardon the pun, on track for our budget, which would have allowed us to say, okay, fine, we can stay at 340 or 400 or whatever. But quite candidly, that's not the circumstance. And I am not going to spend, I'm not able to spend $250,000 or $300,000 a year to hold the NHR event, nor to continue on enticing other events like AMA to come in here, okay, which have the potential for bringing a lot of people in, and didn't the first year, which is pretty typical. And I'm not exactly sure where I'm supposed to be cutting more of my expenses to make this all feasible at the bottom line, okay. I'd cut my salary, except I haven't gotten any in the last 10 years, and neither has my wife. And I've stuck $1.5 million of my personal money into the facility to keep it rolling, to do what it's supposed to do, which is pay back to the community for the commitment the community, the state, the county, the federal government even for that matter, have made behind this event, and behind this facility. I don't take that commitment lightly, and that's why I've made the commitment I have made. And that is a good part of the basis for my request. I would take questions. And again, I'm not crying the blues up here. I'm just telling you the reality of the situation because you need to know that. So I would take questions.
Questions, Mr. Irwin? Thank you, appreciate that. I know we have a motion on the floor. Do we want to massage the numbers a little bit more? If so, I'll withdraw my motion.
I'll go ahead and speak. With the 150, we would have a balance of 150,000 with the cuts that Councilman Harmon has suggested, right?
No.
You know?
The fund balance would be 127,500.
127. Has it ever been that low as far as the balance?
Yes. Karen's probably got the sheet.
Hey, I ended up with some extras, so, here's the, you got that last time, back to 2006?
Quite a bit lower.
Okay. So I'm comfortable with voting on the motion that's on the floor to accept what, the
Okay.
cuts that you recommended.
Okay. All right. Karen, you want to say anything on that before we vote?
Well, I'm the one with the concerns about the ending balance, in particular, if we, let me propose one amendment, and we'll see if there's a second, and that would be to take the general fund transfer from 137.5 to 80. That would get the balance to 180,000, Pam?
Okay, so you want to go from 137.5
Down
to 80.
And that would free up, 120,000?
57.5,
57.5.
which would make that ending balance 180.
Wait a minute. I'm lost. You're cutting the transfer from the general fund from 130, it originally was 200,000.
Correct, I'm taking your numbers.
Right, 137.5 down to 80.
Correct.
So that's a additional difference of 57,500 is what I'm. Or if you take it directly from the 200,000 that it started at, and you take it down to 80, that's.
120,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah.
add that difference back into your ending balance and your proposal,
And that brings the ending balance up to what?
180.
And I amend my motion to include that change,
Yeah, I'll agree to that as a friendly amendment.
friendly amendment, and
Yeah.
then we make that change with the transfer.
Okay. All right. We ready to vote?
Yes.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Okay. Any other items to come before the committee? Seeing none, I would entertain a motion.
Chairman,
Yes.
I don't know when you get an opportunity to approach the podium.
Sure, go ahead, Mr.
Talk
Pitts.
with everybody else. First of all, I want to thank you guys for all your hard work. We wish that we would have been included in the conversation, but you know, it's par for the course, and we just wish you guys would have, you know, gave us some consideration, at least talk to us. You were talking to everybody else about cuts, but when you totally eliminated us, you never even brought us to the mic, and thank goodness that we at least have a chance to present before the council. Thank you guys very much.
Thank you, Mr. Pitts. Anything else come before the committee? Colson, do you have anything?
Yes, sir.
All right, is there a motion to adjourn?
So, and second?
All right, all in favor say aye. We are adjourned.